I woke up one morning with exactly $4.27 in my bank account, wondering if I should buy a gallon of milk or put it toward the bus fare I needed to get to an interview for a job I didn't even want. But by the time the sun went down, I was staring at a digital balance that looked like a phone number. It wasn't a glitch, it wasn't a dream, and it certainly wasn't a mistake, but what I had to do to keep that money, and the people I had to leave behind to protect it, is something that still keeps me up at night, staring at the ceiling of a mansion that feels more like a gilded cage. I need you to listen to how this happened and tell me honestly. If you found out your entire life was a carefully constructed lie designed to keep you poor, would you take the money and run, even if it meant burning every bridge you ever built? Was I wrong for choosing the millions over the people who claimed to love me? Or was I just finally taking what was rightfully mine? To understand how I got here, you have to understand the level of broke I'm talking about, because it wasn't just about the money. It was a soul-crushing, repetitive cycle of failure that seemed to follow me no matter how hard I worked. My name is Leo, and for the last 10 years, I've been the guy who works 2 jobs, skips meals to pay the electric bill, and still somehow ends up behind on rent every single month. My daily routine was a masterclass in survival, a grueling marathon that started long before the sun even thought about rising. I'd wake up at 4:30 a.m. in a room so cold I could see my breath, the dampness of the walls seeping into my bones. I'd drink lukewarm tap water to trick my stomach into feeling full because the half loaf of bread in the kitchen had to last until Thursday. Then I'd begin the long walk. I couldn't afford the bus every day, so I'd walk 3 miles to my first shift at a dusty warehouse, my thin jacket offering no protection against the biting wind. My clothes were thin, my shoes had holes that I patched with duct tape on the inside, a trick I'd learned to keep the puddles from soaking my socks. And my dignity was practically non-existent. I lived in a cramped, studio apartment in a part of the city where the streetlights stayed broken for months, sharing a thin wall with a neighbor who played heavy metal at 3 in the morning, and another who seemed to be constantly screaming at a television. The air in that building always smelled like stale grease, cigarette smoke, and the heavy, invisible scent of collective despair. My girlfriend at the time, Sarah, was always supportive. Or at least that's what I thought. We had been together for 5 years, meeting at a community college library where we both pretended to study while actually just trying to stay warm. She was always there to tell me that money didn't matter as long as we had each other. She'd give me these long, passionate speeches about the beauty of the simple life, telling me that the rich were miserable, hollow people and that our struggle made our love pure and authentic. She'd bring over cheap, $3 wine and we'd sit on my sagging mattress, lit only by a single flickering bulb, dreaming about a future that never seemed to get any closer. Looking back, there were signs I missed, glaring, neon red signs that I ignored because I was blinded by the idea that someone as beautiful and kind as her could actually love a guy with nothing. I noticed she always had the newest iPhone despite claiming to be a struggling freelance artist who only sold 1 painting a year. I noticed her vintage clothes often had designer stitching if you looked closely enough. She'd disappear for weekend retreats, with her family in the Hamptons or upstate, claiming they were ultra-conservative and judgmental, and that I was better off not meeting them yet because they would look down on my financial status and try to break us up. I believed her because I wanted to believe her. I thought we were in the trenches together, 2 underdogs against the world, but in reality, I was the only one in the trench, and she was the one holding the shovel, making sure I didn't climb out. She was the one who suggested I take the low-paying warehouse job instead of the tech internship I wanted, saying the physical labor would be good for my soul. She was the one who accidentally lost my rent money once, forcing me to take a predatory payday loan that kept me in debt for 2 years. My parents had passed away when I was young, leaving me with nothing but a small, locked wooden box and a letter that said I wasn't allowed to open it until my 30th birthday. I'd spent my whole life dragging that box from one shitty apartment to another, through evictions and breakups, joking with Sarah that it probably just contained my dad's old coin collection or some sentimental junk that wouldn't pay the bills. I treated that box like a holy relic, the only physical connection I had left to a family I barely remembered. My father, I was told, was a simple carpenter who died in a tragic accident. My mother followed shortly after from a broken heart. Or so the foster care record said. Well, my 30th birthday was that Tuesday. It was a miserable, rainy day. I had just been fired from the warehouse for being too slow, after I fainted from exhaustion, and nearly got crushed by a forklift. I didn't have money for a cake, let alone a party. Sarah told me she had to work late at a gallery opening, so I sat alone on the floor of my apartment, the wooden box sitting in front of me on the stained carpet. The rain was drumming against the window, a rhythmic, depressing sound that matched the beating of my own heart. I felt truly defeated. I thought about the box. Please, I whispered to the empty room. Please let there be something in here that can save me. When the clock struck midnight, I took the key I'd kept on my necklace for 20 years and turned the lock. The click it made was the loudest sound I'd ever heard, like a gunshot in the silence of my room. I expected old photos of my parents at the beach. I expected a handwritten letter telling me they loved me. What I didn't expect was a series of heavy, gold-embossed legal documents, a black titanium debit card with no name on it, and a high-end encrypted flash drive. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the drive. When I plugged it into my battered laptop, which took 10 minutes just to boot up and sounded like a jet engine, my entire world tilted on its axis. My father wasn't a carpenter. He was Julian Vane, the original founder of Vanguard Tech, a massive conglomerate that now practically owned half the city's infrastructure. He hadn't died in a random car accident. He had gone into hiding after Arthur Sterling, his supposed best friend and business partner, orchestrated a corporate coup to steal his patents and his life's work. My father had faked our poverty and changed our names to protect me from the people who had tried to eliminate him. He knew that if I grew up rich, I'd be a target before I was old enough to defend myself. He wanted me to reach 30, to be grounded and hardened by the real world, to know the value of $1 and the cruelty of people, before I inherited the keys to the kingdom. The documents explained that a trust fund had been maturing for 25 years, hidden in offshore accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands, completely untraceable until the moment I activated the key. I logged into the portal provided in the instructions, typed in a 64-character password from the letter, and that's when I saw it. $64 million in liquid cash, with another $200 million in diversified stocks and real estate holdings. I felt a surge of power I'd never known. A warmth spreading through my chest that replaced the cold knot of anxiety I'd carried for a decade. But that warmth turned to ice-cold dread when I noticed something strange. I checked the access logs on the flash drive, a feature my father's security team had built in. The drive had been accessed before. Someone had tried to brute force the encryption 6 months ago from an IP address that looked hauntingly familiar. I pulled up my own internet bill and compared the numbers. It was the IP address of the router in our apartment. My blood ran cold. She was watching me suffer, watching me starve, all while she went home to her father's mansion on those retreats, to report on my progress. She was waiting for this exact day to steal my birthright. So that's the situation I was in. I was sitting on a fortune that could change the world. Realized that the love of my life was a paid spy for my greatest enemies, and I had exactly 0 people I could trust in this entire city. I had to make a choice right then and there. Do I confront her and hope there's some part of her that actually loves me? Or do I play the game better than she ever could? Before I tell you how I spent that first million, and how I orchestrated the ultimate revenge that left the Sterling family in ruins, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have confronted her, tried to get her to change sides? Or would you have disappeared without a word and taken everything? I really want to know if you think my next move was justified, or if I became the very monster I was trying to fight. I decided to play the part for just one more day. I realized that if I ran now, they would track me down. I needed to move the money and set up my defenses while they still thought I was the broke loser Leo. When Sarah came home the next morning, smelling like expensive perfume she claimed was a sample from a friend, I acted like the same old, tired guy. I hid the laptop and put the box back under the bed. I told her I opened the box and it was just old letters from my mom and some baby clothes. I even squeezed out a few fake tears, burying my face in her shoulder, so she wouldn't see the burning rage in my eyes. She hugged me, stroking my hair, telling me it was okay and that we'd get through our struggles together. "We don't need money, Leo," she whispered, and for the first time, I heard the venom behind the sweetness. She was probably disappointed that the treasure was just paper. not knowing I had already moved 30 million to an account she couldn't touch. While she was in the shower, I used the black card on my phone to authorize a series of transfers. I didn't just take the money. I used the legal documents to trigger a dead man's switch my father had prepared. It was a legal nuclear bomb. It began a hostile, legal reclamation of Vanguard Tech, citing the fraudulent coup and providing the original patents that Arthur Sterling had stolen. By noon, while Sarah was out at work, which I now knew was a high-rise office building downtown, I had hired a top-tier private security firm and a legal team that cost more per hour than I used to make in a year. I didn't go back to the apartment. I sent a professional moving crew with a legal injunction to pick up my box and my clothes. I didn't want a single thing from that life except the truth. I left a single note on the kitchen table, right next to a cold cup of coffee. It wasn't a breakup note. It was a printed screenshot of her family's offshore bank records and a copy of her real birth certificate. I simply wrote, "I hope the paycheck was worth it, because you're fired." I watched from a blacked-out SUV down the street as she arrived home later that day. I saw the moment she realized I was gone. She didn't cry. She didn't look sad. She looked terrified. She immediately pulled out her phone and made a call, no doubt to her father, to tell him the asset had escaped. The next few weeks were a blur of high-stakes legal battles and luxury I couldn't comprehend. I moved into a penthouse that had its own elevator and a view of the entire city. I bought a fleet of cars, not because I needed them, but because I could. I spent my first million on a private security detail that followed me everywhere, ensuring that no one from the Sterling family could get within a mile of me. I changed my name back to Leo Vane. The media went into a frenzy. "The ghost heir returns," the headlines screamed. But the real fun started when the dead man's switch hit the news. Arthur Sterling was arrested on live television for corporate espionage and fraud. The stock price of Vanguard Tech plummeted, and I was there, waiting in the shadows with my legal team, to buy up every single share for pennies on the dollar. I took over his company in a single afternoon. I walked into the boardroom where he used to sit, the man who had ruined my father's life, and I sat in his chair. He was there, out on bail, looking older and smaller than I expected. He tried to offer me a deal, tried to tell me he did it all for the sake of the company. I didn't say a word. I just pointed to the door. But then came the final confrontation. A month after I took over, Sarah showed up at my office. She didn't look like the starving artist anymore. She was wearing a $5,000 suit, her hair perfectly done, but her eyes were red. She bypassed security. I let her in just once. She didn't beg for money. She looked at me and said, "Leo, I did love you. The mission was only supposed to last a year, but I stayed for 5 because I couldn't leave you." I laughed. It was the coldest sound I'd ever made. I showed her the logs from the flash drive. "You tried to steal the money 6 months ago, Sarah. If you loved me, you would have told me the truth then. You stayed for the payday, not for me." She went silent. The mask finally slipped. "You would have been nothing without me," she hissed. "I kept you alive. I kept you fed. You owe me." I realized then that she was just as delusional as her father. I had her escorted out, and that was the last time I ever saw her. However, the revenge didn't feel as sweet as I thought it would. I found out that Sarah's love wasn't the only lie. My father's old business partners, people I thought were on my side, started crawling out of the woodwork, asking for their share, and claiming they had helped my father hide. I realized that being a millionaire isn't about the cars or the houses. It's about the fact that I no longer have to wonder if people are with me for who I am or what I have, because now I just assume it's the latter. I live in a world of NDAs and bodyguards. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but I eat my dinners alone in a dining room that seats 20. I destroyed the people who hurt me, but in doing so, I destroyed the version of myself that was capable of trusting anyone. I'm now the CEO of a company built on a legacy of betrayal. And every time I look in the mirror, I wonder if I'm just becoming another Arthur Sterling. I spent $40,000 on a single watch just to see if it would make me feel something. And all it did was tell me exactly how many seconds I've spent being lonely. Looking back, that overnight transition from rags to riches was the most violent thing that ever happened to me. It stripped away my innocence and showed me that the world is much darker than I ever imagined. It showed me that love can be a weapon, and that family can be your worst enemy. But I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I'm no longer the victim of a story I didn't write. I'm the one holding the pen now, and I've made sure that the Sterling family will never work in this industry again. I bought their house, their cars, and their debt, and then I sold it all to a holding company that turned their mansion into a shelter for the homeless. That was the only thing that actually made me smile. If there's a moral to this, it's that you should never ignore the red flags, no matter how much you want to believe in the fairy tale, because sometimes the person holding your hand is the one making sure you stay in the dark. Trust your gut, hold on to your secrets, and never let anyone tell you that you don't deserve to win. Like this video if you were on my side and think I did the right thing by taking the money and ruining her family. Subscribe for more stories like this where the underdog finally wins, even if it costs them everything. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I go too far, or did they get exactly what they deserved? I'll see you all in the next story.